So we started with a completely different property than Molly and Rebecca did, just FYI. So we have about 400 acres as opposed to 108. So we're doing about 150 head of cattle here in West Tennessee, and our goals are to raise these calves to about 8 months of age, or about 550 pounds, and we're selling preconditioned weaned calves. So let's get into it. So the breeds we're using for our cow heifer source, we're using Simmental cows, and we are running 150 head, and our source is Sandine Genetics. They're based out of Blakesburg, Iowa, and they raise and sell a number of purebred Simmental cows and show calves. So now that I've talked about that, let's get into our bull AI source. We are going to AI through select sires, and we're using registered Black Angus bulls. We're going to use Sits Essential, we're going to use Riverbend Good Book, and Dep WW SFF Duracell. That's a name, isn't it? They're all running about $25 a straw. And so now that we've talked about that, let's get into the reasons that we chose Simmental and Black Angus. So Simmental cows are really quick to mature, they're easy to handle, and they have pretty good feed conversion rates. They're adaptable, so they don't stress easily, and they have excellent calving and mothering abilities. So we chose Black Angus bulls because they improve calving ease and birth weight. They add quality to the meat, and they support the maternal instincts and capabilities of the cow, and then they have black hide, which is pretty popular. And then our mating plan. So our mating plan has 3 steps to it. The first step is that we're planning to AI the herd December 1st, and then we're going to preg check at the beginning of January. So for the cows that took, we're going to separate them from the cows that didn't take, and then turn out a cleanup bull in January with the cows that didn't take. And then for our third step, we're going to preg check the bull-bred cows in February. Now that we've talked about our mating plan, we're going to talk about our calving and weaning plan. Our calving plan is to calve at the beginning of September, and then it will end towards the end of October. And then our weaning plan, we're going to wean the calves in March, and we're going to precondition for 60 days. So I've said that word twice now. What does preconditioning actually mean, though? Preconditioning, or a preconditioning program, is a time of at least 45 days, in our case 60, where a producer will specifically work with the calves to build the health of the weaned calf before they sell it. So calves are started on feed, they're castrated, they're dehorned if necessary, and then they're vaccinated, dewormed, and some producers, depending on the operation and what they want, they will implant them. So we've talked about that, and I've discussed preconditioning. Let's move on to our working facilities. So we are building it from the ground up. We just have the land, we don't have anything else on there. So we're planning to have, we're asking for a hydraulic chute, we're asking for the palpation cage, a scale, a working alley, a holding pen, and gates. And this picture up here shows a little breakdown of all of our costs, and then those total up to about $70,000. Next, we have to talk about our equipment and our storage facilities. Building off of these, the working facility, we're looking to have a truck, a tractor with attachments, a livestock trailer for transportation of our cattle, a side-by-side, and a skid steer. And then storage facility-wise, we're looking for an office, barn hay storage, and then equipment storage. And these costs run close to $350,000. Okay, well now that I've talked about all of that, I'm going to pass it on to Lindsay so she can delve a little bit more in depth about some of our other aspects of the business. Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how we're going to be running our farm, how we break it down. Like Kate said, all we have is the land. We've had to build our facilities from the ground up, all of the equipment that we're going to be using, and we're running approximately 450 acres to maximize our 150 head. So the way that we've broken it down is how you can see up here on the screen. The main thing that I want to talk about is the fact that we have 5 acres that we can break up to quarantine our cattle. If we're bringing on different cattle onto our farm, it's going to be really important to make sure that we're not bringing any diseases, whether that be we're bringing new cows on or when we bring our cleanup bulls into the facility. We don't want to spread any diseases to our cattle because that's going to make us lose money and nobody wants to do that. So That's how we have our pastures broken up. And the way that we're going to manage these pastures is to rotationally graze. We want to rotate seasonally. In a perfect world, you're going to be rotating once a week, but for a facility that's just starting up, that's not feasible for us. We just don't have the time and the money to pay workers to be moving 150 head once a week. So we want to rotate seasonally because a lot of these pastures aren't going to be used. We're going to have pastures that are in use and have an off season, and the pastures that are in an off season, we're planning on heat killing them in the summer, and then keeping our cows on pastures that we have, so that way we're not spreading any sort of parasites and trying to lower our parasite burden as much as possible. The smaller pastures that we have, I can get into this later when we talk about it, but we want a fence line wean. Weaning's the most stressful time for these calves, and so we want to try to reduce that stress, because if you can reduce your stress, you're going to keep more weight on them, and weight equals money, and that's what we're trying to do. So unfortunately, we only have the property. We are going to have to fence this entire property, and the way that we've calculated it, it's going to run us approximately $150,000. So next, to break this down, it's going to seem like a lot when it pops up here, but this is our big nutritional plan for this cow-calf operation. So in the summertime, in order to try and lower our cost of everything, we're mostly just going to be running the natural grasses that grow in West Tennessee, these being tall fescue, orchard grass, and timothy. These naturally grow around here, so we're going to hope that we have a good season. We are going to be running water lines to everything, but if there's no drought, this is what we were mostly going to be feeding in the summertime to our cows. And winter feed is where a lot of our costs come in, because we're going to have to be growing our winter graze. We really want to try and lower our hay costs, because hay can get very, very expensive very quickly, like Molly and Rebecca said. So we're putting a lot of our money into our winter graze. We're running a ryegrass and crimson clover mix, and for 350 acres of ryegrass, it's about $10,000 to seed, based off of the sources that we use, and it's a little bit over $13,000 to seed that crimson clover, and so that brings our total to just under $23,000 for seed, which may seem like a lot, but it's a whole lot cheaper than if we would just be feeding round bales to our herd throughout the winter. But unfortunately, we can't predict the weather, and drought happens, as we all know, this year and with the last couple years. So we are going to have to be supplementing round bales to our herd in order to make sure that those mamas have the best nutrition possible in order to get our calves on the ground the healthiest that they can be. So we're running around 230 bales, and then this will cost us about $16,000 when they cost about $70 per round bale. In order to also help maximize the nutrition of our cows and our calves, since we're selling our calves off live weight, we want to start creep feeding our calves. We're going to do this around 4 months old, so that way our calves can be built up on their nutrition and be exposed to feed before we sell them. Basically, what creep feeding is it's a piece of equipment that allows the calves to eat the grain, but our mamas can't get to it. We want to make sure that they're getting the most out of their nutrition, since that's where our money's going to be coming in. We don't want a whole bunch of grain just being spread all over the place, because that's money lost. And on average, calves eat around 2 pounds per day. If we're feeding them out until they're around 8 months old, that's 120 days. Our total cost for this feed would be around $11,000. Our minerals, because unfortunately, even though we have all of these great forages, that's not enough. So we do want to feed lick tubs to our herds. This is going to kind of help that we're making sure that we're not having low calcium, hypomagnesia, that sort of thing. We want to make sure that they are getting all of the minerals that they're getting. We've also thought about doing multi-min injections, but we'll talk about that later, to our cows. But about what we're doing is 3 tubs a month at $100 each. That for a full year, we're running about $3,600. Lastly, our water. We plan on running water lines to all of our pastures and having waterers in them. That way, since we don't have a source of like a pond or a river for water, that way we won't have to really rely on the drought weather. Okay, next we're going to talk about our vaccination and our health protocol. This doesn't get into it as much. I'll get into it later when we talk about our schedule and our yearly calendar. But the few things that we want to do right off the bat when we're bringing cows and bulls onto our property is we're definitely going to do BSCs on our bulls. These are our breeding soundness exams. if we're paying for a bull each month, we certainly don't want him to be shooting blanks. So we want to make sure that our cows are getting bred if they didn't take to AI. For our cows and our bulls being brought onto the property, we want a BVD test. Nobody wants to have to deal with PI cows and calves. So this is one way to hopefully prevent it, although I'm not sure what Jared and his fencing look like. This is a way that we on our end can try and prevent this from being on our property. And with the purchase of our Simmental cows at the beginning, we run PPEs on them. So this is our pre-purchase exam, just to ensure that we're bringing healthy cows onto the property. All of this because we want to have a biosecure facility as best as we can, and that is how we are going to try and keep everything as safe and as healthy as possible. And this includes quarantining everything in those pastures we talked about earlier before they come onto our property. Okay, now let's break down our calendar. This is going to seem like a long time because we're kind of starting in one place and we want to end up selling at weaning. And we all know that cow's gestation is 9 months, so we've got to run a calendar for at least then. But it starts before we even AI our cows. So in October of around 2023, we would be planting our cool season forage. This is our ryegrass and our crimson clover. We want to make sure that we plant it in enough time so that way we can get water to it and hopefully get that to be as lush as possible before we have to turn our cows back onto it. In November, since we're going to be AIing and using those bulls in January, we want to give about 60 days to do a BSE to make sure that if the bulls we've picked out are shooting blanks, we have enough time to get a new one. We're also going to be vaccinating our cows for breeding and deworming, and what we're going to be vaccinating these cows for are lepto, vibrio, and our respiratory diseases. BRDC is the biggest killer of cows in West Tennessee, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. And we certainly don't want our cows aborting any of our calves. In December, we want to AI our cows. This is going to be our most efficient way of breeding with the number of head that we have. At this time, we're going to be boostering our bulls and making sure that they've already had their BVD test before we bring them onto our property. In January, we want to preg check our AI bred cows. At this point, we will separate them and make sure that they are bred, they're good to go, and then we will turn out our cleanup bulls into the other pastures with the ones that haven't taken. In February, towards the end, we want to preg check our bull bred cows. This is because we don't want to be feeding anything that's not carrying a calf for us. If they don't have a calf, they're not going to be making us any money. It's a harsh world out there, and we just can't afford to be feeding something that's not going to help make profit. So anything, unless it is a first-time heifer, if they haven't taken to AI or a live bull, we're going to be culling. In March, we're really just doing farm and herd maintenance. We just want to make sure that everything, all of our fence lines are good. We're making sure that they're eating their feed. April, we want to start fly control. Flies are one of the most pests. They cause so much stress to these cows, and we want to minimize stress as much as possible. And May, more maintenance. June, we want to replace those fly tags, and each cow is going to be getting 2 at this point. July, we're going to replace those again towards the end because this is when our flies are going to be the biggest problem for us. In August 2024, we're getting pretty close to our calving season, so we want to booster our cows so that their colostrum is full of all the antibodies that we need. We're going to be vaccinating for scours and our clostridials. And then we're also going to make sure that we're deworming our cows to lower that parasite burden. Our calving season begins in September, and we want to castrate as we go. We're not keeping any of the bulls on our property. We are also doing a terminal cross, so we're selling all of our steers, at least at this point. We'll look into keeping our heifers, but at this point, we want to be selling everything at this point in our production. We also want to do fly tags one more time to get us through the end of the season so that we don't have that problem on our calves. Calves will be getting 1 fly tag. In October, the end of October, this should finish our bull bred cows, and this should finish that calving season out. And now we're a year later, so we're replanting our cool season forage as well. In November, we're basically doing everything we just talked about last year. It's just boostering everything again. But we're vaccinating our calves now. We're going to vaccinate at around 2 months and 4 months old. And we're vaccinating for BRDC and our clostridials. So that's our respiratory complex that affects most of West Tennessee. And we're going to be deworming our calves. December, it's the same thing as last year. We're going to breed back our cows and our heifers. January we preg check AI, February we preg check our bull bred, January was when we turned out our cleanup bulls, and March is our next biggest month, and this is when we want to wean our calves. And we are at this point going to rotate pastures and leave some more pastures to heat kill. This way we can lower that parasite burden, and like I talked about before, we're going to fence line wean our calves to try and reduce that stress as much as possible. The end of April is when we found that the market says to be the highest, and so this is the point where we want to sell our weaned calves. So, this is a really scary slide because we are starting our business from the ground up. The price of our calves come spring is around $132,000 when we're selling for live weight, which seems great until you look at our total investment price. Unfortunately, when you're running a business from the ground up, all we started with was the land. Our initial investment is just under $1.1 million, which seems insane, but if you look outside and you want a nice truck, you're going to be spending $90,000 anyway. So in the grand scheme of things, to start a whole business in production, I don't think that this is an unrealistic number. Our yearly expenses after our investment is about $60,000, so if you take away our first-time costs, this is what we're spending each year to run 150 head, and that makes our total profit each year around $72,000, which brings us to paying back that initial investment in around 12 to 14 years, depending on how prices change with the market. But wait, I know that's scary, but we have better plans because this initial investment is just starting out, but there's a lot of things that we can do in order to try to make more money, boost our production, and really get you guys your money back as fast as possible. So some things that we want to look into after our first few years of this property is hay production and sales. We're buying hay right now. It's costing us around $20,000, which might not seem like a lot when you're making that initial investment, but if we can save around $20,000 each year, that's just going to get everybody their money back faster. Unfortunately, this does require more equipment, which is more cost, but in the long run, if we're able to produce our own hay and sell hay to local producers around us, that can save some money and bring in additional revenue. Another thing that we have thought about looking into is feeding out our calves for longer and selling when they're at a higher weight. We just have to take into account the cost of the feed that we're going to be feeding and the way that we're going to have to be producing or using more like fly control and things like that. Another thing we've looked into, since we are having to rent bulls for our cleanup, is a bull ownership or partnership. If we can go in with a bull with somebody, that's a one-time cost other than just maintenance of that bull, and that could save us some money so that we're not leasing other people's bulls. And then if we have that bull, somebody else can lease it and we can make back the money that we've invested into him. And the last thing that we've thought about is looking into our genetics and our seed stock. If we're willing to run and own a bull and find a good quality bull that somebody is looking to breed their herd with, that can be renting that bull out or even collecting semen on him. And if we're running purebred Simmentals, there's always the chance that a local producer might be interested. If we can get proof that our genetics are worth something, look into using our purebreds for embryo transfer. And these are our sources for everything, and that is our production.